What's going on? This is a POV drive of my 1991 CR-X Si. So I've done a few videos on this car. And done a few repairs and a few cosmetic things, and now is the time that I'm doing a POV drive. Going to talk about the car, and hopefully it's kind of overcast today, but maybe you'll be able to get a little bit of a sense of what it's like to pilot a CR-X, especially a right-hand drive CR-X. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the CR-X, then I'm going to talk about the CR-X, in other words, the what it's like to have a Japanese car. And then kind of like a couple things I was thinking after owning this car now for about 5-6 weeks. I've kind of had a few revelations, and I thought maybe they'd be helpful. And so yeah, driving a CR-X, it's old, which is awesome. This is a nostalgia machine, which I'll talk about in a minute, and that's why I bought it. Yeah, it's an old car. You know, the amazing thing about an old car, and this car at this point is 31 years old, is there's just a simplicity, and part of that's just the nostalgia, and just there's a simplicity though about getting in a car. One of the neatest things about getting in an old car, and I would say any old car, not just a CR-X, is just it's special for what it does not have. It's special for the features it doesn't have. Old cars are so different than new cars. Like, I've got a couple newer cars, and you get in and you just feel cramped. Even if there's a lot of room in the interior, it feels so cluttered, so tight. The styling is just busier. Whereas when you get in something like this, it's a tiny little car. It weighs under 2,000 pounds. There is so much room in the hatchback, in the driving area, and just the ergonomics of how everything is laid out. It just feels so much simpler. And so that's kind of one of the first things just I noticed driving this car, and really, again, any old car that you've got. There's just that sense of simplicity that's just in it. You know, it's just harkens back to a simpler time, and it's really wonderful. You know, one of the great things about this car, and again, this would apply to any older car, is just the analog nature of the car. The fact that it has actual dials. Don't run the light. And the fact that you know, the switches. I mean, these little switches over here are just awesome. The tactile feeling, when you push the button, the little light comes on. You actually have a switch for the fan speed. You have a switch that, you know, recirculation, just all the little things that are gone from most present cars is just a really special thing about this car. And then also just, you know, stuff like the velour on the door cards and these seats are, you know, this old velour feeling. There's a smell when you get in an old Honda. I can't describe it, but you know what I'm talking about. If you have an old Honda, there's just a smell that comes with having an old Honda. And it's just a special feeling. About the CR-X specifically, this car was prized for its combination of smallness, driver connectivity, feeling like a go-kart. The inputs, the steering is just very, very tight. Here comes the person on my left that I'm not going fast enough for. Goodbye, Chevrolet. Just a connection to the car. Again, simpler times. Yeah, so, you know, it's the CR-X is everything that people say it is in terms of being small. You feel everything. It's super low to the ground. And then, you know, the other thing I would mention was just Honda reliability. This car is 31 years old. Guys, the air still works. It's R12. It still works. It's cold. It's amazing. That's, you know, and just everything works in this car. Like, there's no button or gauge that does not work 31 years later. And, you know, I drive this in confidence. Would I drive it across the nation? No. But driving it around town, you know, I drive it with confidence that it's not going to break down. Another old thing, or another cool thing, just, you know, little features about this car that, you know, just little things like this. The little vent thing that you can open and close this, and it allows outside air which is different from your typical recirculation button in a newer car. Just another old Honda thing that's just really special. You know, one thing about driving a CR-X though, and this is one of the negatives, is if you get in a wreck or if a deer runs out and hits you, there's going to be a hard time getting parts, getting repairs, depending on how bad it gets. Just little things, because the car's so old. And yes, they make parts, and you can find parts, and you can trade parts, and there's people that, you know, have parts. But that is the thing. There's a mild anxiety, probably with any old car that is that you own. That, you know, what if I drive really late at night and a deer runs out and hits me? It's all over. And you know, that is a reality that you just kind of have to live with. This is a marvelous car, though. You know, if you can own it, if you realize it's old, you're gonna have something old that could break down, that wreck could happen, blah blah blah. That's just part of it. Now, let me talk specifically about the right-hand drive CR-X experience, and then I'll go into a few final, you know, kind of observations that I had. This car has the 135 horsepower ZC engine. It's the mid-grade. Well, it's actually on the higher trim level of the CR-Xs from Japan. But there's one that's better. It's the 160 horsepower VTEC. That's the SIR. This car has the 135 horsepower ZC engine, which is similar to some of the engines they put in some of the Integras in the United States in the late 80s, I think early 90s. The US spec CR-X had 108 horsepower, so this has 135, significantly more. And I just got to say, this is the reason I bought this car. When I looked at it, I was kind of like, I just want to see what it's like. But when I drove it and I drove it and I experienced the engine, I thought, oh my goodness, this is so special, guys. To have 135 horses in a car that's 1,950 pounds is really special. It's not the fastest car in the world. The 0 to 60 back in the day was like 7.5 seconds. But with that power to weight ratio, something really, really magical happens. And if you think about it, back in the late 80s, early 90s, when the competitors, for example, Nissan, their big little car was the Nissan Sentra SER, which I owned one of. And that was a marvelous car. Well, that had 140 horses, and it took 2 liters to get it. If you think about some of the other competitors, some of the American cars that had V6s at the time, and it took them a V6 to get about the same level of power. You know, and then just, you know, thinking beyond Nissan, just others, Toyotas, you know, you think about 135 horsepower in a 1.6 liter engine. It's a remarkable achievement. And this isn't even the highest, again, rung on the ladder. They had the 160 horse engine, which I can't imagine what that would feel like. But anyway, my point is 135 horses is really special in this car. Aside from that, you know, it's got cool things like the mirror fold button that they power fold, which back in '91 was, you know, really a special feature. Very common now, but not back then. And then, you know, just you know, this car, like when people see that you've got a CR-X, it's like I get a lot of head turns. I've never had a car. It's been a long time since my 1980 Civic that I've had this kind of experience. But then when they find out it's right-hand drive, it's sort of like, oh my gosh, and you know, they want to look at it, they want to sit in it, they want to, you know, it's just like a whole new. So like, rare enough is to have a CR-X in decent shape, but to have a right-hand drive CR-X is like a whole nother level of wow. Which, you know, that's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is like, hey, it's cool, like I'm the only guy around that's got one of these. But the curse is, like, again, like I said, if someone hits you, the deer thing, finding parts, like, gets even harder. And for me, I actually, a couple weeks ago, I spent a couple hours online and I just did a whole bunch of research and found, you know, what is the correct timing belt, what is the correct head gasket, what is the correct water pump, what is the correct, you know, plug wires, you know, just pretty much all the basic maintenance items, you know, distributor, rotor button cap, gasket, all that stuff. And I bought every bit of it. Some of it I had to get in England. And some of it was very, very hard to find. Last one left, that sort of thing. So I bought all that stuff just in case I ever get in a situation where I've got to do a head gasket or I've got to do the timing belt. Or if I never use them, it'll be for the next owner to have all that stuff, which I think would be a neat incentive. Let me close with 2 thoughts about this car, just to kind of sum it up. And again, this really probably applies to any old car, but I want to say that it specifically applies to this car that I'm driving. And that is, there's two things. Number one, this car is an absolute nostalgia machine. It is the kind of car that you drink in the nostalgia as you're driving around. It reminds you, if you were alive back in '91 and driving, it reminds you of that time. It's really special. And again, the looks that you get from people, you know, I have not had a car ever that's gotten this kind of attention. I've only owned it, again, a few weeks, you know, month and a half. And the looks, just driving by, people just turn their heads, and it's a special feeling. It really is. It's cool if you want to reconnect to your past, if you're, you know, I don't want to say midlife crisis, because it is a normal and healthy thing to be of age and think back to your youth and re-experience it in some healthy ways. So, you know, that is a thing. It's a real thing. But, you know, it's just a great way to experience nostalgia, to experience, you know, a simpler time, to get in the car and, you know, take a drive down the road and just, it brings you back. And that brings me to my second point, which having a car like this can just turn you into an asshole. And what I mean by that is there is the temptation, having this car, I have noticed, that you sort of feel like, I'm the most special guy on the road. I've got the most special car. There's only one of these. Everybody, look at me. Look at my car. You know, I've gone to car shows for many, many years, and I've never had a car that gets this many looks. But I've seen a lot of them, guys. I've seen the really old this, or the, you know, the really rare that. And unfortunately, and I'm speaking of myself here, most of the owners of those cars walk about like a peacock, as if, hey, I had 10 grand, I had 20 grand, I had whatever, and I found this, and I've got the only one, and I'm better than everyone else. And that temptation to just become an absolute dick is a real thing. And to be quite honest, it's really a turnoff. And when I see it in myself, it becomes even more of a turnoff, because it's really easy to have a car like this and show up to a car show or show up anywhere and know you're going to be the center of attention. And that does something, I think, to the human soul that's really dangerous. And so that was sort of a surprising thing for me. Here's a random church. I'm just going to park in and do my final survey of the car. Yeah, guys, you know, it's just a thing that, you know, I guess I just felt like it was important to throw this into my review here, because I don't want that to happen to me. And, you know, as I said, I'm just being honest. That's what I've seen in others, but now it's like, oh, now I get why they have that look on their face, why they talk that way. That's in me as well. And it's, you know, it's a dangerous thing. So yeah, having a car like this is awesome, but the flip side is you gotta watch out, because when you start thinking that you're the best thing going, it's just an unattractive thing, as attractive as this is. So you know, nostalgia machine, yeah, can turn you into a pretty conceited, self-absorbed narcissist. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a hunk of metal. I made it really pretty. I love driving it. It's in super shape, and it's really special. But it's just a car, and I'm just a guy. And you know what? One day I'll pass this on to someone else, and they will enjoy it. And, you know, it'll remind folks of a simpler time. Well, I think I've said everything I wanted to say. This is a beautiful car. I did, since the last video where I talked about painting the wheels, I did get my black lugs and center area painted. So she's kind of finished. This is a B+ condition car. Lugs came out really good, and as I said in my last video, I love the combo. I'm glad I went with the gray. This is a week later with the paint on the wheels, but you can see how nice it turned out. And if you're really clever, you can read through my 9 coats Advan. I am going to paint the calipers at some point. Well, guys, there she is. The 1991 CR-X right-hand drive Si. Hope you enjoy the review. Probably about done with content on this car. I'm just going to enjoy it once or twice a week. And I hope you enjoy the day. Hope this review's been interesting and encouraging. Peace to you. See you next time.